Hey there, welcome back. I am here with Kris Journey of Journey Woman Astro for your February Goddess Report horoscope. So, if you are listening to the podcast, we'd really appreciate if you'd go to anchor.fm and support this podcast. And if you are watching on YouTube, click the subscribe bell, comment, like, share. It really supports us, helps other people to find this podcast. If you enjoyed it, we think that they'll enjoy it too. So, just wanted to say that really quickly. So, Kris, thank you for joining me again for the month of February. We've got a really big month ahead. So, what are your first impressions on the month of February for the goddesses in astrology?
Yeah, excited to be here with you, Taylor. So fun to be doing this. Um, well, I think we have a few themes this month. Um, we've got some romantic themes for the month of love, which is lovely. I think we're going to have a very romantic Valentine's Day, and we can talk about what specifically is going on. February 14, February 15. But then we do have some transits that suggest maybe some adjustments and changes in relationship. And then we have some transits that I think point to some societal issues that are very much in the forefront right now. So we'll talk about those.
Very cool. Thank you for that overview. It sounds like we've got relationships, we've got power struggles and dynamics, and we'll get into it week by week. So, should we just start off with the first week of February?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So, beginning of the month, we've got this Jupiter opposite Ceres from February 1st to the 8th. And this like so many things in astrology, there can be a positive manifestation, there can be some less positive. And we've got Jupiter, the planet that expands and invigorates and enlivens what it interacts with, opposing Ceres, the asteroid of comfort and nurturing. Ceres was the goddess of grain, and it's where we get the word cereal, I like to point out. And so Ceres is associated with food, with grain, with agriculture, with nature, and also with comfort and nurturing. And so this could be a very loving, warm, and comforting sort of energy with this opposition. The one thing to note about Ceres is that she can be associated with floods and natural disasters. And so Jupiter opposing Ceres can suggest the potential for some kind of natural disaster, unfortunately, on the mundane, what we call mundane or collective level.
Gotcha. So Ceres, the goddess of grain, cereal, the harvest, and Jupiter that expands everything it touches. Jupiter's in the sign of Aries in the individual, and if it's opposite to Ceres, that means that it's in the sign of Libra, of balance and harmony. And so we're seeing perhaps some opposing energies in terms of what are we expanding with how we nourish ourselves or our food or our food systems or maybe supply chains, and bringing a lot of attention there, and how we work together in a Libra series and Libra way to grow ourselves, Jupiter and Aries, perhaps. Another thing I think is really interesting, when I hear you talk about Ceres and cereal and the beginning of February, is that I just remembered that February 2nd is what we call a cross quarter day, or the holiday of Imbolc. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, the holiday of Imbolc is about being in the belly of the mother. And so we're talking about Ceres, who has this maternal archetype on this holiday of sowing seeds. Mm-hmm. We sow our seeds, at least in the northern hemisphere, and we've both lived or do live in New York. And in upstate New York, February is the time when you're going to cold stratify your seeds. You're going to order your seeds. You're probably late if you're ordering your seeds in February, to be honest, in New
My
York.
neighbor who's a gardener texted me last week. He's like, "Are you starting seeds?"
Yeah. So I wonder if we'll just see something about that, like more stories about people who are doing their own gardening and things like that.
Well,
So
and this is such a lovely opposition. Um, so it's at 6 Libra, Ceres is at 6 Libra, Jupiter is at 6 Aries. And if this is intersecting with personal charts, with a person's chart in some way, it could be tremendously uplifting. It could be incredibly supportive, this opposition. So if you have anything at around 6 Aries, 6 Libra, um, uh, or what's it going to be, Taylor? It's going to be
Capricorn and Cancer.
square those, right?
Yeah.
And then what about the trine and sextile?
So for the trine and sextile, we'd see if you have anything at 6 Aquarius or 6 Gemini, which Mars is right now at 10 Gemini, so it's not too far off. Or if you have anything at 6 degrees of Leo or Sagittarius, you're going to get either a sextile or trine on both of those, which are all lovely. So it's more of an expansion of how you're nurturing yourself and growing the seeds inside of you, which is cool because I don't mean to like skip ahead. I know we'll get there in just a second, but we're going to have a full moon, and between a new moon and a full moon, that's when you grow things. You plant literal or figurative seeds and you want them to grow. So maybe we'll see like a little extra boost of whatever we started at the new moon last month.
Yeah, I think it could be really, really positive. Um, if you have something around those points, um, it could be a time where you're just feeling tremendously supported, that there is a growth period in some way, where you're really feeling sort of boosted up and getting support for something that's exciting, that fills you with this enthusiasm with Jupiter, that's growth, that's future oriented, growth oriented.
Very
So
cool.
yeah, it can be quite lovely, I think, on a personal level.
Yeah, so very very future and growth oriented. That sounds great. So thanks for that, Kris. So what's the next thing that we're going to see in the first week of February?
So also, yeah, February 2nd to the 8th, we have a Mars is sextiling Juno, the asteroid of committed partnership, serious relationship, and um potentially protest, social justice activism. So this, it's a positive aspect, it's a supportive aspect in the sextile. So I don't expect, um, I feel like the tone here is supportive. It's peaceful. It's sort of reasoned. It's not like Mars square Juno. It's not like some of the other transits that we have coming up in February. I feel like this could be a pretty easygoing week for relationships, and potentially, um, uh, uh, hopefully, um, constructive dialogue around social justice.
Okay, so taking action and constructive action around or dialogue around social justice with that Mars sextile Juno that's happening also the first week of February.
Yeah, yeah. It's very supportive for relationships as well, going into the month of love.
So maybe would that mean, Kris, being Mars sextile Juno is going to be supportive for relationships because people can take action to having conversations that might have been challenging or might have felt difficult? Or I know one of the things that has been said about Mars, especially Mars retrograde, which it's done with that now, but Mars in Gemini has been about nonviolent communication. So maybe taking some of the things that we've learned since August or October of last year about how to communicate nonviolently and express our needs and get those needs met. Because Gemini is about talking and communication, whereas Juno is going to be in Aries, the sign of the individual. Mars is in charge of Aries. So there's this ability, perhaps also with Gemini, to see both sides of a thing and to hold both truths at the same time and then come together to partner with Juno.
Yeah, I love that. There's something about this that makes me feel like this is somebody, like, it makes me think of the Valentine's Day cards that you used to get as a kid, and you would write them out and get ready for Valentine's Day. And like this is, I feel like this is the lead up to Valentine's Day. This is people evaluating relationships and sort of saying, like, do I want to commit? What do I want to do for this Valentine's Day? Because we know it's a big deal. It's a big deal if you're dating, if you're in a relationship, whether you do something for someone, whether you don't, do you ask someone out on a date? Like, it's a Valentine's, this is a natural period of like thinking about relationships. And I feel like this is a supportive aspect um for making some step forward in commitment, whatever that might be, relative to where you may have been before February started. Feel like this is a lovely way. Both of these aspects are lovely ways to start out February.
Okay, so we start out with Jupiter. We're growing ourselves. Jupiter opposite Ceres, growing ourselves, nourishing ourselves, and then maybe because we know how we're growing and nourishing ourselves, we get this Mars sextile Juno that allows us to make our needs known or communicate, and both make our needs known, but maybe also ask someone else or have a conversation with someone else about that. And then it results in growth, and it's a fertile ground for relationships, that we can have a nice Valentine's Day and make some plans about it. Like, hey buddy, I don't want to be disappointed on Valentine's Day. This is what I'd like to happen. Kind of a thing.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I think it's taking concrete positive steps toward commitment, whatever that might be relative to where you are in a relationship at the moment. So it might be like, yeah, making that dinner reservation so that you're set for February 14, or whatever the day is you decide to, you know, ordering those gifts, whatever it is. But yeah, taking some step toward commitment. Commitment is flows with a sextile. It's easy.
I like that. So commitment's flowing with the sextile and it's going to feel easy. But then we've got something coming up, maybe that's starting the next day.
Yeah, and this, you know, I almost wonder if we should batch our themes and talk about the love and the romance, and then get to the
The other stuff,
yeah.
power dynamics. Absolutely. So I think with the love and the romance, the full moon,
Oh
it,
man, yeah.
it might bridge the gap between the two, but the full moon is emotional, and we are talking about growing and having your needs met and having difficult conversations. And the full moon certainly heightens our emotions, brings them to the forefront, allows us to really just have things come to culmination and then release. So the full moon is going to be in Leo. Moon will be in Leo at 16 degrees 40 minutes of Leo, and the sun will be at 16 degrees 40 minutes of Aquarius. So you want to look at your chart and see if you've got anything at 16 40 of Leo, Aquarius, Scorpio, or Taurus, because you're going to feel this the most. And then if you've got anything at like 16 degrees of the air signs or the fire signs, you'll also feel this in a more supportive way. What's interesting about this full moon for me is a couple of things. One is that it's a micro full moon. So it's actually very close to black moon, because a micro full moon, it's not a technical term, but it means that it is happening at the apogee of the moon. And we'll get into definitions maybe later or on another episode, but I think part of what Black Moon Lilith is a representation of the farthest point that the moon gets from Earth, or like the apogee of the moon. Did I say that right?
So yeah, and I might have gotten this wrong last time. I would love to do just a segment where we just go into the details of it. But so it's Black Moon specifically, the point, and not the asteroid, is what's known as the far side of the moon. And funny enough, on my Instagram, It was when AOC was elected. One of uh, NASA was able to take a picture of the far side of the moon for the first time for some reason. Very first time. Yeah, it's on my Instagram. And we've never seen it before. It's the first picture we've ever had of the far side of the moon. It was just a few years ago. And so there's something, so this, it's almost like it's a hidden point. It's a mysterious point. And yeah, very much tied up with the moon.
Okay, cool. So Black Moon Lilith, the point is going to be tied up with the moon and this hidden side, the shadow side. And we've got the moon, full moon happening in Leo on February 5th, depending on your time zone and location, but I think it should be February 5th for the whole world. And what else was the other thing I want to say about that is it's going to be square the nodes of fate, right? So the nodes are in Scorpio and Taurus, and
square Uranus.
And square Uranus, exactly. And it's
Really
more closely square Uranus than it is the nodes. So how do we see that? What do we think when Uranus is square the nodes, Kris?
The full moon square Uranus in the nodes. I'd love to hear what you think about the nodes. I mean, Uranus for me suggests unexpected events. But all of the transits both transits that we've already talked about, Jupiter opposite Aries, Mars sextile Juno, are also in effect on February 5th still. So I think there can be some surprising events associated with this new moon for sure, but there's perhaps potentially with Jupiter opposite Aries in terms of natural disasters, but there could be surprising events around relationship as well, because Juno is approaching Chiron, which we haven't discussed yet. But
yeah, and it's interesting because Uranus is going to be at 15 degrees of Taurus and the sun and moon will be at 16 degrees. Those are just 1 degree off of 15. So that's why it's very close to Uranus, which is the instantaneous resolution of irresolvable opposites, as Rick Levine says, one of my favorite interpretations of Uranus. And so sudden unexpected things happen when Uranus is involved. But when you've got the 15 degrees of the fixed sign, we call those the world points because we see worldwide global news happening and things that impact everyone. So if you in your natal chart have things at 15 degrees, you could feel that of the fixed sign, certainly. If something happened during the eclipse, that's how the nodes are involved here. So when we have the sun and the moon square the nodes, it means we're halfway through eclipse season. So we are at the 3-month point since the last eclipse that we had, and it's going to be another 3 months before the next eclipse. Mm-hmm. And well, it's a little bit under 3 months until the next eclipse, because the next eclipse is going to be April 20th or perhaps 19th, depending on where you are in the world. And so we often see the culmination of events that started about 87 to 90 days ago come to fruition. And so if there was anything in the world news or your local news, your regional news that was impacting you and your neighbors or something like that, your community, we may start to see some resolution or sort of the next stage of things happening now, some update on what happened back then and a reminder. But we also, I think it's possible that we see a foreshadowing of the next eclipse. Now, the next eclipse is technically, the nodes will still be in Taurus and Scorpio, which is a lot about getting our emotional and material needs met, whereas Aquarius and Leo are more about the courage to be myself and be an individual and to speak up and not really care what other people think about me, in my opinion. And so navigating all of those things, how are we all collectively getting our emotional and material needs met? How do material needs help to support getting our emotional needs met? one example that I think is very obvious is, do you have money? Do you have health insurance? Do you, and how money and health insurance, with which health insurance really just is a form of finance to help you gain access to health insurance. And so or health care rather, and that health care could include mental health care. And we absolutely have a mental health care crisis in the country right now. And how does that story then play into the Leo and Aquarius axis of, I need mental health care in order to work through my emotional issues that also help me to understand and realize that I am who I am. I need to express who I am on that Leo and Aquarius axis, because if I don't shine sun with who I uniquely am, Aquarius, then my emotions, the moon in Leo, the sign of being brave and courageous, there's going to be a conflict there. So that could be something that comes up, is money, individuality, uniqueness, being yourself, and mental health care.
I love that. And um absolutely. And I also think this 15 degrees Taurus is a really interesting point, because it's actually where the May 5th lunar eclipse is going to happen. So I actually think that lunar eclipse is at 1458 Taurus. It's right there. It's 3 minutes away. So I think that this 15-degree Taurus point, it's going to be a kind of a hot spot potentially for this year. So we may actually see whatever happens in February around this full moon, as Uranus is going over 15 Taurus. The events of February may set up the rest of the year in some way, because we've got, again, that May 5th lunar eclipse right at this same spot that this February 5th full moon is squaring. And then Jupiter will be back within a degree of 15 Taurus around the end of the summer, early August through early October. August and September. Yeah, it's two full months. Jupiter will be hanging out right around 15 Taurus.
Yes, that's its station degree. Yeah.
Yeah, and so if anybody, if this full moon affects someone's chart, they're going to be it. I feel like there might be a bit of a bang. There might be something that set off here in February that will continue to play out over the year, and in a positive sense, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because this is also reminding me of the fact that we're going to have Venus retrograde in Leo.
Yeah.
And when Jupiter is stationed at 15 degrees of Taurus, Venus at that time, August through October, will be in Leo where this full moon is happening. So again, another tie-in, another echo that whatever's happening now will probably reflect back on by that point in time over the summer.
During Venus retrograde and in Leo in the summer, and then that Jupiter retrograde or station at 15 Taurus from August through early October. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of echoes backwards to today and then forwards into the future about relationships and how we're handling them, and on both a personal level if it hits your chart, and then on a collective level as well.
Yeah, there's potentially, I feel like there's big change here. Potentially technological change, personal change. And I feel like February is foreshadowing March.
Oh yeah, March is a whole thing. I don't want to get into March, but yeah,
I'm not getting into me either.
Because we got enough going on in February to get us all set up for March. So the next relationship aspect that we have in February is going to be Juno conjunct Chiron, February 6th through 10th. So Juno representing partnership and speaking out about what's wrong, conjunct Chiron, the wounded healer teacher, and also the charismatic wounded healer teacher, but where we face that festering wound that's really hard, and it's just like a real pain point. Like you can be 70 and someone says the thing to you and it just kind of sets you off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how are you seeing that show up
Uh,
for us?
yeah. Uh, this one, um, this one could be painful. And I look at it and I want to say, if something difficult happens between February 6 and 10, which is when Juno is within 1 degree orb of Chiron, hang on. Don't delete their number. Don't throw out everything they've ever given you. Just hang on, just get through it. Because we have a really romantic Valentine's Day right around the corner, but there could be something that comes up prior to it that feels painful, that
Yeah.
tests a relationship in some way.
Yeah, and so this is going to happen at 12 degrees of Aries, and Aries is the sign of the individual, where we're unique, where we just kind of take action. We can be pretty spontaneous, not in a way that your Uranus is spontaneous, but almost similar. I mean, Mars is very, let's just go, let's make it quick, let's take action. What I'm reminded of by friends, astrologers, mentors, quite frequently is magi astrology and how Chiron plays into the relationships through magi astrology, which is a whole other thing we don't have time to get into, but I'm just referencing it. If you're interested, you can just Google magi astrology. But
And
Chiron,
that's where your charisma associated with Chiron is coming from. Is that right?
it comes from a couple places. One is someone named Elsa who's out there and has a blog.
I know. Yeah.
So Elsa has talked about Chiron and charisma. I think Barbara Hand Clow in her book Chiron points out charisma because Chiron taught these amazing heroes. He taught Asclepius, who's the father of medicine, taught Achilles, great warrior, taught Jason, and there's another fourth one I'm forgetting, but many other people. These people did not have time for someone boring. They did not have time for that. It was like, you keep my attention, teach me what I need to know, and you need to have a certain level of charisma. So I think that makes sense. But also David Cochran has a wonderful lecture from Kepler College that is available, I believe, for free on YouTube about Chiron being charismatic. He references Elsa, which is why I know about that. And he has some great examples of modern day people, like I believe Michelle Kwan is one of them. So it's athletes, it's actors, it's musicians who just have this. Chiron is about Saturn and Uranus together, and Saturn solidifies, crystallizes, contains, makes material, and Uranus is electrical energy. And when you have those two, I love the example of Michelle Kwan because he says, she kind of like, if you think about like the triple flip she does, or like any kind of ice skater, like there's a tremendous amount of like gliding and stuff like that, but there's a tremendous amount of power that you have to put like down into your feet through your thighs, and just like that electrical energy channeling to like explode you up again. And so you can think about it like that kind of energy. But back to the magi astrology, one of the things that I think about
Strength
is
and electricity equals charisma. I like that. Yeah.
yes, exactly, thank you. And is Chiron's also about our soul, because if you think about that one thing that is just very painful, because Chiron was hit with a poison arrow, I believe was the story, and he was half fae, I think, so half fairy and half god, because his mother was a water sprite. I think that's what it was. And so he's not half human, but he's not totally God. So he's not completely immortal. So he was hit with a poison arrow, I think is what it was, in his leg or thigh, something like that. And then it festered for a long time. So it didn't kill him instantly, but eventually led to his demise. And so he learned how to like heal himself and heal other people actually before he got hit. But then afterwards, it was like even more so. But he could never heal himself from the wound that was inflicted upon him. So if you think about that story and that archetype, if you're willing to be vulnerable enough to let someone see where it hurts, they're seeing a part of your soul. They're really seeing you. And so Chiron can be about relationships. If you and someone else have Chiron in your synastry charts or something, or just looking at your charts together, Chiron is pinged and becomes active, it can mean that you have a soul connection, you have a very deep connection to one another. And then having Juno come there, and we talked about Juno sometimes being the jealous partner. It can be perhaps a little envy, perhaps a little jealousy coming up, where especially with that Mars Juno, of we're talking about nonviolent communication, talking about saying the thing we need to say. It might
Versus sextiling that Juno Chiron conjunction. Yeah. So it's an interesting combination
yeah
of wounding and then potentially
healing and talking it through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it could be significant growth and intimacy comes out of a potential crisis as well.
Yeah. And it could feel big because we've got the full moon, Juno separating from Jupiter, which expands things. Mars is also separating from Jupiter, a sextile with Jupiter, which expands things. So yeah, I think we will feel that.
We had, and we of course we talked about the Juno Jupiter conjunction last month. So yeah, this is either, to me it's either a crisis or it's a growth point, or maybe both.
Yeah, and I think a few hours after the full moon, the moon will, well, before the full moon, the moon will trine that 12 degrees where Chiron is, and just after the full moon, the moon will trine Eris, who's the shit starter. It was like, hey, I got some information for you. So don't be starting stuff. Don't be telling people things they don't need to know. Mind your business. But if you did, or if someone else does this to you, perhaps because it's a trine, it's beneficial and it's flowing. It's very easy for people to have loose lips, but also if they do, potentially that information is helpful to everyone involved. And this also just reminds me of the difference between gossiping and processing. So when we process things, we talk about ourselves and we seek help in growing ourselves. But when we gossip, we talk about other people, and there's no benefit to me or you or the third person that isn't in the room, and it's not respectful, really. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And of course it's always wise to talk about people as if they're in the room.
If they're in the room, yeah.
But then of course we've talked about too, there's a value in being able to share honestly with people, and that's not gossip, that's learning from someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So is
learning with others. Pallas is also, there's this interesting, Pallas is squaring that Juno, trining Venus. There's another interesting thing happening in this full moon chart, and for a few days afterward, where this is about intelligent action around romance.
And strategic too, because Pallas is strategic, right?
Yeah.
And being strategic with our emotions, because Pallas is in Cancer, the sign of where we feel our emotions and know what they are. So perhaps it means that if we have some strategy about our emotions, we actually are demonstrating some emotional intelligence, but somehow that's working at cross purposes with any feelings of jealousy or envy that we have, and but our desire to take action to discuss it, if we can do it with some forethought, with some planning, to use that Mars in Gemini, to use even Jupiter in Aries, which Jupiter is like the teacher, and it's a blessing to just come with the generosity of spirit, to come with the most generous interpretation and just say, hey, is that what you meant? Hey, this thing happened and this is how it made me feel. Is that what really was going on? Did you mean to make me feel that way? Did you mean to say the thing? Did you mean to do the thing? Because this is who I know you to be, and I'm just here to help you be the best person you can be. And I really hope that you can help me do the same for myself.
Yeah. And the square, Pallas square Juno could be sometimes it just sort of intensifies the action, I feel like, or it intensifies an event. And so it could be that you feel more, you feel motivated or impelled in some way um to 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 think seriously about relationships with Pallas squaring Juno. And with the trine to Venus, Pallas also trining Venus, it could be that it all works out well. I think that this full moon, um, Venus is also square Mars on the full moon, which is physical chemistry, very
Mm.
sexy. So,
Yeah.
it could be that it's actually a good time. If you're thinking about Valentine's Day and you want something in particular out of it to come out of it, this full moon could be a good time to address it and like you're saying, use those palace, sort of use that emotional intelligence, use that ability to communicate.
Yeah. And you know what you're reminding me of, Kris, is that just like the holidays, the December holidays can be really difficult for people. It's important to remember that Valentine's Day holiday can also be very difficult for some people. And there is this extreme of people who are very much in love and they go with every stereotype you can think of Valentine's Day, and things are working very smoothly and perfectly, or at least from the outside. On the inside, it might not be that way, but there are people who think that this is a thing, which will come to Venus and Neptune in a second, but it's sort of like a delusional love. It can be a romantic love, but it can also be like a little like it's just an image. It's just like they're taking pictures on social media, but behind closed doors, not what's going on. And then there are people who are looking at that or not, but they don't have that regardless. And it can be very depressing. It can be very isolating. It can be very emotional for them, especially with the full moon happening. And to remember to be kind, to remember to be compassionate, to use that Venus, Neptune, Vesta, Astrea, all in Pisces, bringing us loving compassion, and maybe thinking about Valentine's Day in radically new and different ways, since we've got that Uranus playing in with the full moon, where we're saying Valentine's Day is not just individual romantic love, it can be this collective compassionate love. And perhaps instead of buying me roses, why don't you donate to a charity for refugees? Or let's bring Ceres in and go stand online for a like a food kitchen, or donate to a food pantry or something like
I
that.
want to say, like, do something for um, a domestic violence shelter or women who have been trafficked, or you know.
That is really sexy. That is a sexy thing. If somebody did that for me and they were like, "Hey baby, I didn't get you roses because I know you can buy your own because you're an independent woman, but what I did do was I found us a food food pantry, domestic violence center where we can like go donate, and I donated in your name." Oh my God. I mean, like, that's
Right?
really thoughtful. That's some
Dream,
thoughtful stuff
dream
right
person.
there. I know I'm laughing, but like I'm just like
It's
realizing
true.
this for the first time. It's actually like it's not like the domestic violence is not sexy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that someone who would be thoughtful enough to contribute to social justice instead of just buying roses, or
They get
like
thrown
think
out.
about someone who could actually benefit from the money and the capitalism that go into this Hallmark holiday, this capitalist holiday, and really bring in compassion for people who deserve love, and to share your love, to share the love that you have, and like have your love benefit other people is pretty cool. The Mars square Venus too, I think highlights some of that frustration, because it can be physical chemistry, because when you have a square, things are working at cross purposes, and it's like I want you, and then it's like I don't want you, or it's like I want you and I have to physically do something about it, and that's why you get that chemistry. But
And
it
it
can
can
be,
also be if you have chemistry that you can't,
yeah, unrequited. You can't make it
that
happen.
for whatever reason, that's fights will start, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So to remember that all of this, when you're feeling one way, it can be an invitation to feel another way, right? I think that's what I hear you saying, Kris.
Well, yeah. And yeah, Valentine's Day, I have like virtually no Cancer. I have no water. I have virtually no water in my chart anyway. But like Cancer, almost nothing in Cancer. But I feel like it's a Cancerian holiday. It's for the folks who just feel, the Pisces and who are very romantic, who love romance, who just naturally express themselves that way, and that's lovely. I think that's great. We don't all have to be that way.
This is so funny and interesting because Kris, it's not that you don't have, we've talked about this before, and I don't know if you want to talk about your chart, but you don't not have water. You've got, even in your not waterness, you have waterness in your chart. Yes, I just made that word up. But
as our beloved friend and teacher Moon
yes,
Zlotnick has said, I'm honorary water with Moon Neptune.
Yes, exactly. You're an, I didn't want to call it out, but yes, it's exactly what I was thinking, that you have Moon Neptune, and that's very friggin' watery. So, but and also you're reminding me with like Valentine's being a watery holiday, because you're saying Cancer's a water sign. We're talking about Venus and Neptune. Neptune's watery, Pisces is watery, Venus in Pisces is watery. This is always happening during Valentine's Day, always happens during Aquarius season. Aquarius is about collective compassion. It's about putting our heart on our sleeve. Literally, we see hearts everywhere, Leo. And because Leo and Aquarius are opposite, and this is happening, right after the full moon in Leo. But also, the obvious thing that you're going to see on social media is, don't forget the Valentine's Day is Scorpio baby season, because that's what people say about it, right? And so there is this connection to water signs. And even though Valentine's Day always happens when the sun is in Aquarius, it's pretty frequent that you're going to have either Venus or Mercury or some planet in Pisces, because of the way planets move. You're going to have something in Pisces most of the time, not all the time. And now we get Venus, a planet of love, in this watery sign of Pisces. And yes, we've got this Cancerian energy, and then any babies conceived on or around Valentine's Day or because of Valentine's Day are likely to be Scorpios if they come, if they're born at term.
Cancerian, Piscean, also absolutely Piscean, and
Scorpio, and also
I think it's the most romantic sign,
right? And especially with Venus square Mars rules Scorpio, and Scorpio is intense. It's deep. It's very emotional. Yeah. I mean, since we're on the topic, should we jump to this Venus Neptune conjunction? Yeah, go for it.
In Pisces. Really on February, this is in orb, February 15th, February 14th. You couldn't ask for a better aspect on Valentine's Day. Venus conjunct Neptune in Pisces. That is just the essence of Valentine's Day right there. It's romantic, it's sweet, so I hope that everyone
looks good. Right? It looks good. I think Venus Neptune, like, it's romantic, it's sweet, like you said. It also looks good. Neptune is get the camera out, make it cute. Like, meet cute, make it cute, looking good. Even if you don't have someone else or someone's else, if you're monogamous, you're poly, whatever you are, whoever you are with, you be with yourself. Go get cute. Absolutely. Love yourself and go get cute. Just love on you. Go to the spa, go get your hair done, go get a new outfit, go get your
perfect day to pamper yourself. Absolutely.
Or even if you don't pamper yourself, look in the mirror and tell yourself that you are hot as all get out.
Great day to get a haircut, though. Great day to go shop and get a new outfit. If you know the astrology, you might as well plan it. Plan getting because I swear to God, I got a haircut one time on like I had Venus square Uranus. Venus was squaring my Uranus. Something was along those lines in my chart, and it was a terrible haircut. And I realized I should have planned it out. I only get my haircut twice a year. Like, this was 6 months of a bad haircut. Like, you don't want it.
It's interesting because it's okay. So Venus will sextile Uranus.
If you're gonna get a haircut, and get it on a Venus day.
Get it on, which is Friday. Friday is Venus's day. You could argue that even though
Or
Tuesday,
Venus
February,
Venus aspect, I
yes,
was saying. But
yes,
yeah.
definitely. I might not do it when the Mars Venus is exact, especially if it's a Tuesday, because Tuesday is Mars's day and Mars is going to be in charge of that day. But
Maybe not
Venus,
Venus square Mars, no, but like
no, a positive one, yeah. And Venus will, before it applies to Neptune, it will sextile Uranus, which is sort of like impulsive. So if you make an impulsive decision, you just find a stylist, you find something, an opportunity crosses your path, say yes.
Yeah.
Because it will also sextile the north node. So I think it's a great opportunity if someone wants to set you up on a blind date for Valentine's Day and you find out a couple days before. That could be a really beautiful blind date where it's almost like, oh my gosh, you were just laid in my lap and you were sent from the heavens or something like that.
Yeah.
Like a movie, like it's so Netflix movie vibes, isn't it?
It is a little bit, but it's funny because I feel like I I I'm a classic skeptic of everything until I actually experience it myself, and like so the Cancer boyfriend who's super romantic and just heart on his sleeve, the whole thing. All of a sudden, I'm like, I've never been romantic in my life, but now I can see the value.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah. And you're reminding me too of like, okay, we can look at the negative and we can look at the positive of a thing. And I was just reflecting on the last difficult thing that we had, which was Saturn and Venus were conjunct. And we all had it by transit right before the beginning of February. So like last week of January. I also happen to be having it in my own natal chart because Saturn is coming to conjoin my own natal Venus. And so I'm having this like very extended Saturn Venus thing going on, which is lovely. But, you can look at it and read about this or like just know as an astrologer, like Venus Saturn either means you're going to like let go of a relationship and break up with someone, or it could mean that you have a serious conversation with someone in order to redefine your relationship, and that
talked
may
about it
mean,
last month. Yeah.
right, and that may mean like letting go of things. And so it's important whether it's like Venus square Mars or Venus conjunct Saturn, or a Cancer relationship or heart on your sleeve or whatever it is that we're talking about, that if you're feeling something that's difficult, to know that it is like a pair of weights for you. It's difficult to pick up, to deadlift 500 pounds. But if you can work your way up with these smaller transits, like moon transits or just any mundane transit, you're sort of strengthening your muscles by acknowledging that not all of life is just easy and fine, that it's an invitation for you to become your best self by doing something that's difficult so you can be proud of yourself and develop the tools and skills that you need to be in better relationship with yourself and others, and then just have a good life.
I love that. And I also think, yeah, life sucks sometimes, so that's why we got to appreciate the good times.
Yeah.
And like uh and okay, so I just want to point out, because this is really fun, that I think they're just about within orb on the 14th, but definitely within 1 degree orb on the 15th. We have Jupiter squaring the asteroid Eros, which is very sexy.
Ooh,
And
what day
then
was that again?
the 15th,
The
February 15th.
15th. Okay, so and you'll feel that on Valentine's Day because it'll be applying, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
And then that Venus Neptune conjunction, Pisces, on the 14th is trine the asteroid Psyche, which is generally thought to indicate have some relationship to the soul. So just adding a whole nother level of romance to this. And on so I just think those are fun transits for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I like that. So Psyche, so like what's in your head, like what it sounds like, right?
Well, so Psyche, I believe, um, people are welcome to correct us if I'm wrong, but I believe Psyche is the Greek. It comes from the Greek word for soul. Uh,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So just like the soul, yeah. So like an expansion of seeing like your soul.
Yeah, and so in relationship astrology, Psyche um, is considered like in the synastry or in the relationship chart. It's going to be about soul connections. It's going to be almost about having like a psychic connection to somebody.
Ooh, I love that. That's really beautiful.
Even a past life connection.
Ooh.
Those. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So
It's very deep, very romantic.
I love this. This is super romantic Valentine's Day. Thank you for sharing that, Kris. So that's Valentine's Day. So that gets us through the end of the second week of February. So
and real quick, I do
yeah.
there is one kind of like one caveat here on Valentine's Day, and that is Mars does oppose the moon on the 14th. And we do have Mars still sextile in Chiron. Mars is so what is that? There's going to be a grand trine, Moon, Chiron, Mars. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Okay, so Mars is in Gemini, the moon will be in Libra, and then which one did you say? You said Chiron, but Chiron's in Aries, so that's a T square.
Moon is trine Chiron. Chiron is sextile Mars, and then Mars is opposite the moon. So this is it's a Moon Chiron Mars connection. These are supportive aspects aside from that Mars opposition Moon, which could be sort of a little bit tense, a little bit argumentative, a little bit defensive, but there's a lot of healing involved here too with these supportive aspects from Chiron. So if something does come up on the 14th, do your best to kind of talk it out, because you got a whole bunch of really positive things going on, and we do have that Sun Saturn conjunction opposing Lilith on the 14th as well, and we can it might not be within quite 1 degree orb on the 14th. Actually, that Sun Saturn, it's not going to get to 1 degree orb until the 15th. But that we can talk about when we get to our second theme.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just wanted to sort of just point out there are some caveats about Valentine's Day. There are a couple things could change. That could add some shades of gray, some nuance, maybe tiny bit of conflict, but I would say keep your eye on that Venus Neptune conjunction and Jupiter square Eros. Super sweet, super sexy, super romantic. I think those are the far more significant transits.
Cool.
On those days. But yeah, and then should we can wrap up this theme maybe. I know your son is.
I know, it's like coming in now, of course. Like trying to sit in front of
there
me.
You go.
Okay, I'll just be over here for a little bit.
Should I think we can wrap up the romance theme relatively, because that's really the highlight of the month. It's so sweet, that Valentine's Day.
I think that was a pretty good summary, everything that you said. It's really sweet, but I will say, just to what you said about the Mars opposite the moon, that when you have Mars square the moon, I find that to be more difficult, and I find it to be most difficult in natal, or if there's an eclipse involved. Mars opposite the moon in natal, I find, or conjunct the moon, I find to be a little bit easier. It just means that you're willing to fight for something, or someone else has emotional needs that are opposite to the way that you're taking action, or someone is taking action that is somehow different than or opposed to the way that your emotional needs need to be met at the moment. But whereas Mars square the moon is more of, this sucks and I don't like it and no one's winning. I think Mars opposite or conjunct, like I said, is more of like fighting for what you need and getting what you need and doing something about it. So I think that's nice. And having Chiron and Jupiter and Juno there at the sextile trine point, we call that the point of Thales. So when you have an opposition, it means if you have those planets in Aries that are making that supportive sextile trine, it actually helps to negotiate the differences between the two. So you would look to a chirotic person, a Chiron person, you'd look to a Jupiter person, you'd look to a Juno person, you'd look to your partner, you'd look to a therapist, you'd look to a teacher, you'd look to a mentor, a guru, or to your own inner wisdom in order to help you negotiate any differences that you're experiencing.
I love that. I love that. So that's a hopeful twist. Great.
Yes.
That's great.
Cool.
Um,
So what's up next?
Well, in terms of the rest of the month, sort of romance wise, we've got Venus sextile Pluto, February 18 and 19, which can be and the 20th. And that can be certainly a nice one for chemistry and attraction.
Emotional intensity, very deep romance, where you're feeling passionate, you're feeling committed, you're feeling very deeply bonded, you're willing to go there with someone in a way that is supportive. If you have discovered something new, perhaps you do discover something new, some new information about your partner or your friend or whoever you're in relationship with, and that becomes information that transforms your relationship for the better, and it becomes very healing, and it's something that was not obvious on the surface, and the fact they're able to confide in you, Pluto, it feels like a secret or something like that, or maybe you have inside secrets now or inside jokes or something like that. Pluto's not really a joker, but
it's intimate though. It's very intimate, I think.
It's very, yeah, for sure.
So this is, if you had that blind date on Valentine's Day, maybe you get closer to them in this several days after. This is your next date. Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's like, hey, I just wanted to tell you something.
Next time you hang out, it's hopefully it's a good time. Yeah. But yeah. So, all right. Yeah, and we have Pallas square Jupiter at the end of the month, but I feel like that's just sort of like Pallas herself, a bit more of an androgynous transit, not necessarily romance related. So yeah, I feel like we've sort of wrapped up the romance. I mean, Venus does go into Aries on the 20th at the new moon at 1 Pisces, and that that's a sweet new moon at 1 Pisces. There's something that feels romantic about that to me. With Venus is sextiling Pluto at that time, so Venus just moving into Aries. If there's a potential for a new relationship here with Venus moving into Aries, a new moon at the start of Pisces. But
yeah, so I'm just looking at my chart here. I wanted to see, so we've got the new moon in Pisces is happening at about not quite 2 degrees, but 1 degree of Pisces. The sun and moon will meet up on February 20th in the afternoon, so it's about 1:30, 1:25ish East Coast time and about 4:30ish Pacific time, and it's separating just 2-3 degrees away from Saturn. So the sun and the moon will be with Saturn. Like the sun will have been with Saturn just a few days before the moon will have been with Saturn. I
have 2 a.m. for that time. I don't know.
Oh, do you have 2 a.m.?
But I get it from like.
Oh, I think you're right. I'm sorry. I'm just looking at
the 2:05 a.m. EST.
Yes. So thank you. So if it's 2:05 Eastern, that's about 11 p.m. Pacific time. So yeah, that would be the 19th.
I can
right. So thank you for that. And Venus in Aries is
that's what Sirius has. Yeah, 2:05.
Yeah, that sounds right. Thank you for that. So I think Venus in Aries is really interesting because one of the things that we haven't talked about directly is the relationship of Aries and Aquarius, because most of February is Aquarius season, but then we move into Pisces season. And we did talk a bit about Aquarius and Leo, and then Taurus and Scorpio, and like money for mental health and being yourself and being compassionate for groups of people. But I think that Aries and Aquarius is also a very important conversation to set us up for March, because we'll see Saturn move out of Aquarius, we'll see Pluto move into Aquarius, and then in July, we'll see the nodes shift into Aries and Libra. And so I feel like February, a lot of it is helping us to establish our relationships, to get on better solid ground with them, because a lot's going to be shifting in the world over the next couple of years. And if we
Potentially in our lives as well.
in our personal lives and in the whole world at the same time, and if we know who we are and who our people are, they can help us. And I think it's really about who we are. So Aries and Aquarius together, I think how you synthesize that and why Aries and Aquarius people will get along really well sometimes is because Aries is just themselves, whereas Aquarius seeks to be themselves, but does think about what are other people going to think about me, because they are constantly getting feedback from other people saying, why are you like that? Why are you doing it like that? And then they second guess themselves. But they are different and they are anachronistic. They're forward thinking. They're the people who pull us into the future, the Aquarians. And the Aries serve as a great example to Aquarians, because Aries do not GAF what anybody else thinks, unless they happen to have something in Aquarius, like a North Node or a Venus or something like that, that kind of
They run on instinct, right? Mars
yeah,
is Mars world, very instinctive. No,
yeah,
there's no second guessing. There's no self-consciousness. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that Venus moving into Aries can help us all with a little bit of courage to be ourselves and to have our own style and say what we want, be ourselves, and know that we are our own best friend. We are our own soulmate. We incarnated body, mind, and spirit um to be our own best friend. Me, myself, and I, we are the holy trinity within ourselves, and we could just keep it moving. And if anyone else has a problem, like, I'm sorry that they have a problem, but that's their problem. It's not my problem.
Yeah. And when we're in good relationship with ourselves, that's when we attract the people who are best for us. I
Yes.
know,
Our
for sure.
Aquarian tribe that doesn't second guess us, but boosts us up and cheers us on and says, oh
Mhm.
yeah.
Venus and Aries is also like, um, as opposed to Pisces, can be quite like go out and get it, get what you want in love. Whereas
Mhm.
Pisces is like, come and get me. Aries is like, I'm getting it. You know?
Yeah. And I think Venus and Pisces can also be like, um, I love everyone, and this one looks good, 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 because everybody is good. So let's just get it with everybody, and everybody wants to get it with me. Whereas Venus and Aries is more of what you said. Like, let's go out and get what I want and what I need and what's good for me.
Mhm.
And whatever is good for me will come to me. Whereas Venus and Pisces doesn't even know what it wants, because it sees the beauty in everything, which is wonderful to see the beauty in everything and everyone. But there, you need a little bit of discernment that comes from the polar opposite Virgo to really get that Venus and Pisces to say, you're the one that I want. So as much as Venus and Pisces can be romantic,
It's romantic with everybody.
it's non-committal. And sometimes that Saturn, the commitment that you get from Saturn is romantic.
Yeah.
And Venus will come to sextile Saturn. So hopefully, like, and it's a couple weeks off, but hopefully if you had conversations with someone about your commitment, once Venus sextile Saturn in a couple weeks, you'll have like a development of that to say like yes or no.
Yeah. I think this is like we had that Jupiter Juno conjunction last month. I really do think that relationships might be highlighted in some way. And that things could be shifting. There could be a new relationship. Maybe a current relationship is deepening. Maybe it's like we talked about last month, maybe it's time to walk away and choose yourself, you know.
Choose yourself. Yeah. Always choose yourself. Never betray yourself.
Yeah.
There was
Good
a
point.
sorry, what?
Good point.
Yeah, never betray yourself. Venus and Aries, like always love yourself, never betray yourself. I saw Carolyn Miss was talking with Oprah, and yes, some people think it's problematic. I'm just going to say it. Everything's possibly problematic, but we're talking about Venus and Aries. So it's like if you have a problem with it, then don't listen to it. But she was saying,
I don't know the controversy.
okay. Well, I mean, everything with Oprah, I feel like is controversial these days, and everything with like any kind of like spiritual teacher is also feels somewhat controversial to someone. Like
I
not to
miss,
everyone, but to
what's
someone.
wrong with Oprah? I like her.
Oh, some people can't stand Oprah. Some people can't stand Brene Brown. People can't, you know, if no,
I heard Mindy Kaling. This is I saw that one, but I didn't hear
oh, I
anything
see. I
good.
didn't hear that. But you know what? Someone recently told me, I think it was Felix Wild who was on my podcast a few months ago. So watch that episode. Was like, if you don't have any haters, you're not doing it right because you need to take a stand. You need to know who you are, and someone's not going to like it, and that's okay. Then they get filtered out and they go their own way. But anyway, like Oprah asked Carolyn Miss, how do I know I'm on the right track? How does someone know they're on the right track? And Carolyn Miss said to her, you know, because you stop betraying yourself. You no longer in relationship with someone who makes you feel like you are betraying yourself in order to honor them or in order to make them happy or whatever it is. You just don't have that feeling anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and on the positive side, to me, one of the things I love so much about astrology is it helps us identify who really makes us feel good. If somebody's Venus is on your sun, they're going to make you feel like $1,000,000, every time you're with them. And, so to really pay attention to who really makes me feel like I'm amazing. Like, no matter what I look like, whether I just woke up or I'm like, and whatever. I mean, I think that's key as well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true.
Uh,
Cool.
but anyway,
So what do we have next up?
all right. So we go. Are we going back? We're doing
Is that all
Lilith.
the relationship stuff that we have
I think
for
so. The
February? Okay. So
the
this is
the
the
sweet,
second theme of February
yeah,
then.
the sweet part of the discussion is closing, and now we get to the serious stuff.
The juicy stuff. So what's the juicy stuff that we're getting to, the serious juicy stuff?
All right, so we've got some transits with Lilith this month, and Lilith, we started talking about Lilith last month, and um, the archetype here is the archetypes involved with Lilith are very complex, but we can talk about some of them. And so February 3rd and 4th, Black Moon Lilith will oppose Pluto. And that same transit will happen again February 26th through March 1. And then we've got February 9, Lilith opposing the Sun, Saturn conjunction between roughly the 9th and the 14th of February. Around that time, Black Moon Lilith will be opposing the Sun. The Sun will move to conjoin Saturn, and Lilith will oppose that Sun-Saturn conjunction. And then I'll just move through.
And so tell us what Lilith is and Pluto and together.
Yep. And then the last one of the month, Lilith will oppose Pluto once again. So we start out February 3rd and 4th, Lilith opposite Pluto. And at the end of the month, Lilith will oppose Pluto again. And so then we've got bracketing, start and end of the month, Lilith opposite Pluto. And then in the middle of the month, 9th roughly through the 14th, Lilith opposite a Sun-Saturn conjunction. This is some heavy stuff. Yeah, potentially. So Lilith, there's lots of positive things about Lilith. There's also some pretty negative things. And one of the, and we could separate out what's the archetype of Lilith, what's the story of Lilith, what's the mythology, the history of the figure of Lilith, and how that's been used to sort of interpret women's role or keep women down or whatever it is. But there's the Lilith that we see in the chart. And how does Lilith operate in a chart? How does this symbol operate when we see it, and what is it connected with? And one of the things that I and the teachers I've studied with have seen is Lilith can be pretty nasty. Lilith can be associated with cruelty, with abuse, with chaos, with rage, um, um, and it's one of the reasons I when I talk about Lilith, I'm kind of like, we got to take this seriously because it can be some very dark stuff, some very pretty terrible stuff. Um, and and so when we've got, and as an example, Lilith was conjunct Chiron in late January of 2020. Lilith then retrograded and was conjunct Chiron again in early February, went direct conjunct Chiron again in late February, and then all in early 2020, and then same thing, end of March. So Chiron and Lilith joined up at the start of COVID. And so we've got Lilith, this chaotic energy, destructive energy, conjoining Chiron, which can be wounding and healing. I mean, to me, that's like a perfect signature for a pandemic, for a plague.
Yeah.
That's killing people and wreaking havoc. And then after that, Lilith went on to hang out with Eris and Uranus in late April and May. So Eris, discord, Uranus, shock, and just upheaval. I mean, think back to 2020, they just seem like perfect symbols to me of representing sort of what we were going through at that time.
Right.
So Lilith opposite Saturn and Pluto and the Sun this month. To me, this talks about serious power struggles. Talks about weighty encounters with power. And the first thing I thought of when I saw the headlines with is it Tyre?
Yeah.
Tyre
Nichols.
Yeah. And that we have yet another one of these horrifying tragedies that exhibit the full scale of human cruelty on video. It's rough. What I think this, and I know you'll tell me what you think. I'm very curious to hear it, but I think it's worth tying this into Pluto moving out of the end, just right at the end of Capricorn, into Aquarius, because Pluto in Capricorn has been so much about wrestling with the right use of power.
Yeah.
Confronting abuse and the right use of power, the right use of authority with Pluto and Saturn, and Lilith, in a way is this rage, also confronting power and authority that's not being used correctly. I do think that Lilith has a strong social justice component, even if it's a bit out of control.
Yeah. So social justice, and what I'm hearing from you with Lilith, which can which can be cruel, and Pluto, which is about power, so systems of power and oppression, people who use power and oppression, Lilith in cruel ways, so that horrifying things, sometimes pandemics, the murder of innocent civilians, happens. Now, with the pandemic, we did have a lot of other things going on in the sky. And so it's not like it was just a Black Moon Lilith thing. So I don't think we're saying that a pandemic is going to happen just because Black Moon Lilith is opposing Pluto.
And of course, we had the Saturn Pluto conjunction. That was by far
and
the
Jupiter
biggest.
Was there too. Yeah.
And Ceres. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's interesting how the chart, every symbol in the chart kind of has on, in a sense. And
absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I think can happen when you have Black Moon Lilith in aspect to Pluto is someone who reveals, because Pluto can be a disclosure. And I would like to know where Mercury is, because if Mercury's involved, then it's definitely a disclosure of the cruelty, like a disclosure of the information. of something happening. And so I think it can be someone who you can use it in a positive way to advocate for things that people don't like to talk about because they are difficult to talk about. So to talk about domestic violence, I don't love to talk about like people's charts so much, but I will say that one of the people I very much admire in terms of her talent and her skill, as well as the topics that she brings to light, is Mariska Hargitay, and she does have a Black Moon Lilith square Pluto aspect. It's separating; it's pretty far, but it's by sign. And what Mariska Hargitay does is she is an actress on Law and Order SVU, which is about sex crimes. It's a sex crimes unit. The show is actually going to be called Sex Crimes. And then they were like, oh, that's too hard. People don't want to watch a show called Sex Crimes. So they call it Special Victims Unit. And what she does is not only like is an actress in the show using her own talents and abilities, which the show in itself brings to awareness. And actually her Black Moon Lilith is out of sign conjunct to Mercury. It's about a 8 or 9 degree orb. So through what she says, through what she does, through her acting, that in itself speaks for itself. But she also does philanthropic efforts, and domestic violence and bringing awareness to sexual abuse is one of the causes that is close to her heart, and that she actually, as an individual citizen, takes action on. And so that's a square, which is a different sort of aspect than in opposition, but we could use it in a positive light in very similar ways. We don't all have to be actresses or actors on SVU, but we could have a conversation about things that are difficult, or look for stories and then share them. And it's perhaps, I haven't looked into the chart of Me Too, but it could be a Me Too is sort of the feeling that I'm getting from it. So whether it's Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, we could see some action, and that would be a positive way, is to support these causes and to uplift the voices of people who are at the head of these organizations and have been affected by horrible things.
Yeah. And one of the things we talked about is this idea of I have high, maybe I'm optimistic. I have Sag Moon over here. I'm always optimistic about how things might go, but Pluto and Aquarius, I hope, will be continuing to confront these questions of how power is used and misused, and in ways that are liberating, that open up the discussion, that you know like we talked about, maybe it's a Mars and Cancer feel as opposed to a Mars and Capricorn feel, that there's a that we can look at alternative forms of keeping communities safe. That, I mean, it's just such a outrageous hypocrisy that this brutality is the exact opposite of what should be happening. So I hope that as Pluto moves into Aquarius, we find healthier ways to express authority.
Yes. And
that's more in line with Aquarian humanitarian ideals.
Yes. Yeah. So
it takes into account we're all interconnected.
That we're that we're all interconnected, and also that there's sovereignty of individuals, that individual sovereignty is important to acknowledge, regardless of how different someone is from you, Aquarius. And no matter how eccentric someone is, if someone's not hurting you, don't hurt people. Don't hurt people out of fear, period. Don't hurt people because you're hurt. Don't hurt people. Don't hurt people.
Okay, yeah. Right? Yeah.
Help people.
And so, maybe with Pluto and Aquarius, we can really start to grapple with this, to me, is a serious philosophical issue. Like, how are we using power? How are we teaching these police officers to behave? How, what is their culture? Which is it?
Yeah.
you know, and can we transform the culture of power to be more humanitarian, to be fair, to respect individuals? I that's my hope for Pluto and Aquarius. We're going to see significant changes.
Yeah, and it reminds me of there have been many efforts towards I'm sorry, I'm losing the word, but defunding the police, because Pluto is
Yeah.
wealth. Pluto is
Yep.
wealth and power. They're tied together, but they also are different delineations of Pluto. And Aquarius is the collective and the things that the government, the state, the sovereign person, the king or queen, does for the people. And so, how Pluto are we using wealth to, and how is the person in power using money in order to help and protect people from violence? Pluto can be sometimes very violent, and so is Black Moon Lilith. But Kris, you wrote an article. Do you want to talk about that a couple years ago?
Yeah, well, it was back a little bit further. I mean, we don't need to talk specifically about that article, but I think that there's actually a program that the article is about in San Antonio, started by a man named Leon Davis. And I was really honored to talk to him. And it was a pretty inspiring story that he had, because what he's done is he's trained the Bahar County, Texas police force, 6,000 police officers, in de-escalation tactics for dealing with mental illness. Because, the sad truth is that a very large proportion of people who are in jail have mental health issues, because we no longer have treatment facilities for them. We tore all the mental hospitals down, and we didn't replace them with anything. So now, unfortunately, the police are dealing with mentally ill, and they're going through the jail system. And so, at any rate, Leon Evans in San Antonio has developed this program where they're teaching de-escalation tactics to the police force. They're teaching conflict resolution. They're teaching uh, just nonviolent communication, essentially. Back when I interviewed him, this was actually back in 2015. This is a while back. More than 6,000 officers had undergone the training. Upwards of 99.5% of the Bahar County Police Force. And at the time, he said it's pretty expensive. The training quote is pretty expensive, but they know the return on investment is very high, because it's really helping law enforcement officers go back to that good community policing and have some other skills to deal with the public, rather than just the military command voice. And
Yeah. So that brings us full circle, really, to how we started, which was talking about money and mental health. and then the Pluto and Aquarius Leo axis of, can I be myself even if I'm different, even if I have mental health issues, perhaps, and how are we going to use our power, our collective resources, like the police, to support people with mental health. So I do wonder if we'll see more of like a defund the police, because it wasn't about taking money from the police. It was about reallocating that money towards programs like the one that you're talking about, where folks are saying, let's actually put some mental health resources in here so that the mental health resources can respond to mental health crises, instead of having a violent response to something that requires compassion and medical expertise.
yeah, and so, long story short, they essentially basically emptied their jails.
Wow.
And then they set up a treatment program. The recidivism rates are very low. It's an incredible success story. Encourage people to look into what's happening in San Antonio if they're interested. But yeah, absolutely. The headline in my inbox this morning: police reform legislation in the spotlight.
Look at that. That's so cool, especially because we know, anyone who's looked into this or knows anything about it, we know that there's a prison industrial complex. So we all know it's very obvious that we don't need to have people in prisons. We all know we don't need to have police officers shooting people with mental health issues. It is perpetuated by capitalism and the prison industrial complex, where money is brought into prisons, and it just fills the pockets of executives and certain people and the lobbyists that support them and support the laws. And so there
And
are solutions
patriarchy
to this.
and white supremacy, right?
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Patriarchy and white supremacy as well. So I don't want to like divert too much, but I did just like look something up while you were talking because I think it's related and it brings us back to like I was talking about Mariska Hargitay. I said I
Yeah,
don't like to talk about these people, but I love these people so much, and so I'm only saying this out of
I
love.
love that
And their
chart. She's
charts
got a great chart.
are available online. So I'm sorry, y'all, but the other person that Mariska Hargitay, her partner on the show is Elliot Stabler, and like recently on the show they like came back together, and it's a romance that is budding between them. Spoiler alert. Sorry. Go watch the
Oh,
show.
okay.
And so I just looked up Christopher Maloney's chart, and they both are their charts are fascinating. They're both Capricorn risings, I think within 1 degree of each other, if their birth times are correct, around 15 degrees or so of Capricorn. And so that makes people pretty compatible. But we're talking about Black Moon Lilith opposite Pluto. And Black Moon Lilith is going to oppose Pluto at the late degrees of uh Cancer and Capricorn. And I just talked about where Mariska Hargitay has Black Moon Lilith square Pluto, and that's her. She's got Pluto Uranus in Virgo, and then she's got Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius. Well, guess what? Christopher Maloney has Black Moon Lilith at 1 degree of Leo, which is just a which during the month of February, Black Moon Lilith will go back to 1 degree of Leo. So he'll have a Black Moon Lilith return. And it's opposite Jupiter at 2 degrees of Aquarius, and opposite out of sign where Pluto will be 28 degrees 44 minutes of Capricorn. So he has, and we talked about how Black Moon Lilith was activated by the Saturn Jupiter conjunction with Pluto, and he's got a Jupiter Saturn conjunction out of sign, but Capricorn and Aquarius, and opposite Black Moon Lilith. And so we see again in the show, who is he? He is a police officer, and then he becomes a police detective, where he is his character is actually very angry and very violent, and he had a number of incidents where he was shooting his gun to the point that he's been investigated multiple times, but you're led to believe like he's a good guy. He just got put in bad situations, and 1 or 2 times his temper did pop off and he wasn't in the right, but he deserved a second chance. And in today's show, he still struggles with it, but he's grown and he's evolved. And so what you're talking about with like, whether it's Tyre Nichols and police shootings, Elliot Stabler, this guy, Christopher Maloney, like the character he plays is one of these police officers where this is a real thing. So we're talking about the astrology that's happening in the sky. And now I'm tying it into someone who has this in their natal chart, and the character that he's arguably best known for, like he has this in his chart and this is real.
And
So it's like a
yeah,
solid example that what we're talking about, like I just
great
looked
example.
this up, like is a
It's a great,
thing.
it's a great example. And
Yeah.
and we know that actors play people who
Who they're like, right?
resonate with their chart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
resonate exactly with their chart. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I bring it up. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because I didn't make that obvious, but that's
No.
what I was saying, because that is a thing in astrology that you find many people, if it's a biopic or whatever kind of movie it is, if you can find a chart of the person that they're playing, there's an echo in the chart somehow. Either the archetype is expressed, the archetype that they're playing, you can see it in their chart, or if they're playing, like I haven't looked at that Austin guy that played Elvis, but like for example, that like someone who's playing a real person, you can
Yeah.
see that their charts align, and they have like Selma Hayek and Frida Kahlo is an example. I think it's a Cancer
Yeah.
Leo connection that they have.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jupiter opposite Lilith, so that could be uncontrollable rage with Lilith, that just kind of comes out of nowhere. Yeah, like,
And it's different and it's weird too, because the
and
other characters he's played are like big weirdos. Like he played this one guy who was like, I don't know, like on drugs, and they were like cartoon characters popping out of his head and stuff like that, like a bunny on drugs or something like that. So Aquarius is a weirdo sometimes. We talked about that, and I got Aquarius placement, so it's no shade. But
no,
yeah,
I'm a huge fan. Yeah. The and the other thing that Jupiter opposite the Lilith makes me think is he's gonna like strong women.
Ooh, yeah. And he
And,
does, because
and
Olivia
Mariska
Benson
Hargitay
is
is
a
certainly
strong
that.
woman. Like,
Yeah, she's yeah,
totally.
and yeah, women who
I like that. Hot
maybe
tip. Hot tip if you're a strong woman. Sinistry.
by some people as even threatening. Yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty
yeah.
cool. And it is in the first and seventh house of committed partner of self and committed partnership. So that is pretty cool.
Mhm. And Lilith can be very sexy. There's a whole thing, a whole side of Lilith that's all about sex, really. Just
Yeah, that's how the story started. I mean,
yeah.
we can say it. You want to say? I mean, I'm happy to say it. It's like, she wanted to sexually dominate Adam in the garden, and he wasn't feeling it or whatever, right? Or
You
God
know,
wasn't feeling it.
and it wasn't even necessarily, I don't know that it was necessarily that she wanted to dominate. She just didn't want to be submissive.
Oh, right, right.
She wasn't just, he was like, you must.
She was like, let's both enjoy this pleasurably.
How about that?
Like, I'll do my thing, you do your thing, and we're doing this together. I'd like to try this position. You can try that. And then all of a sudden it was like not cool. It was not cool for her to like try some shit, which was totally normal. I could like go on a whole tangent. Yeah, dudes do stuff that's like totally not normal all the time, and it's like supposed to be okay.
Yeah,
Gaslighting.
yeah. And that story, I mean, it's just such an incredible example of it's mind fuck.
Mhm.
It's a straight up, like a straight up, but keep women down kind of. It just couldn't get any more blatant.
Yeah.
It's just pure sexist propaganda.
Yeah.
Um, and potentially worse, it's inviting sexual violence, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and so that's why um uh Lilith is such a great symbol of rebellion and resistance and
Yeah.
claiming agency and autonomy and sovereignty over ourselves, our power, our sexual um autonomy, or whatever the word is, liberty. um
Yeah. You're reminding me of a few things with what you just said, Kris. You said, it can invite sexual violence, and we're talking about, if someone expresses their needs, their wants, there's the common phrase like don't yuck someone's yum, right? Well, what I'm thinking about with the synthesis of everything we talked about, I hope I'm not like jumping around too much. I hope this makes sense, but that we have a lot of Pisces energy, Neptune, Venus this month, which is sometimes about film. We talked about actors and film and TV and portrayals. We're talking about romance. We're talking about sex. How do you combine those things? Pornography, right? And so I wonder if we'll see some of the revelations that we'll see might have to do with regulations around it, or exposing bad practices or promoting best practices so that people don't yuck their yum and can get their needs met and can feel fulfilled, because there's a lot of shame around it and there's a lot of um, stigma around it. But the fact is, it's an enormous industry, and I don't want to say most, I don't know what the numbers are, but probably most people like engage in it or watch it or are aware of it at some point in their lives to some degree. And there's a lot of bad stuff that happens there that's wrong and bad and needs to be reformed and needs to be fixed. And so if we can bring some light from the sun, bring some truth, Pluto maybe digging up some things, um, you could bring some best practices and really clean up the industry somehow. So I'm curious if we'll see anything about the pornography industry this month with the astrology that's going on.
yeah, and not only, I think that's fantastic, and um I'm personally a proponent of legalizing prostitution.
Mm-hmm.
um but um
And sex work. I don't know if people like
yeah,
to call it prostitution or sex work. I was
sex
thinking
work,
about that the other day. I
that's
was like,
right.
I'm not sure what the proper phrase these days is, but yeah.
I think they're both okay, but I do think sex work is better. Yeah. and you're right. And but and also reproductive rights.
Yeah.
It's about autonomy.
Because if you're forced to have a child, that is sexual violence. That is bodily violence. That's harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Lilith opposite Sun, Saturn, Pluto, right at the, at this moment where Pluto and Saturn are both moving into new signs. Um, you know, if we're getting a taste now of what could happen with Pluto and Aquarius, I think this is an element of it. This is a layer of it, and I think it is going to be about confronting power, so that it's used in
Hopefully
because
better ways.
Lilith can be enacting cruelty or rage, and it can also be an explosion of anger against a Saturnian, Plutonian expression of authority. It's
Yeah.
incendiary.
It makes sense too, because it's not just Black Moon Lilith. I mean, if you want to synthesize like a lot of this month, and I think we've got like maybe something nice to end on. Maybe we could
We
end on
might.
the Venus
Although I'm
Vesta or
totally
something.
into the right use of power and revolution, and
Yes, we'll just sandwich it like my HR career like
but
always
no, I
promoted. It's like
agree. I
we
agree.
sandwich it. We say like the nice stuff, then we do the difficult stuff, and we sandwich with a little niceness on the end. But
No,
how I see the story playing out over the next month is like we've got Venus and Jupiter and Juno is that partner. Maybe there's envy or jealousy or something, but besides that, like let's let the jealousy and envy stay aside for a second. The thing that Juno does is speak up for what's wrong, and then Venus comes to meet up with Chiron, and there's like some pain and stuff, and then Venus or Venus will meet up with Chiron later, but Venus will meet up with like Aries too, which actually this is more like March, but like this
that's
is what
March.
it will happen, that like Venus meets up with like there's some pain, and then there's like Eris is like the shit starter, and then there's Ceres who's like, how do I nourish myself and what feels good and what feels caring, and do I need like a maternal figure? Like there's going to be some maternal energy, and then there's this Black Moon Lilith, and so it's all like they're all working together in this synergistic way. It's just like, who is the story, and like what kind of character are they? Like, are they a Leo character like Black Moon Lilith is right now, where it's like courageous and brave and fiery and about freedom and about power, and the Aquarian energy too, where it's like, hey, who I am, respect me as an individual, and let's make the world a better place, and it's not just about me, we need to like reform the whole system. Aquarius is often about the system too, so yeah.
Yeah, and you've made the point before. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was what was it, the French and U.S. American Revolution, right?
Yeah, were the revolutions. Yeah.
So again, more so I on February 19, Lilith will sextile Mars and square Uranus. So there could be something unexpected that day. Lilith square Uranus is a pretty bit of a tinderbox aspect there. But at the end of the month, we do have Pallas squaring Jupiter for quite some time. From February 17th all the way through March 1, when when Venus will meet up with Jupiter. So Pallas is squaring Jupiter, and then by March 1, Pallas will square Venus and Jupiter, which will conjoin. And at the very start, at the March 1. So this Pallas square Jupiter is interesting because I think of this that in one sense, the square could actually be a good thing, because if you're increasing insight and wisdom and strategy, this could be a very thoughtful transit for the end of the month. This could be people are really engaging in serious, thoughtful conversation and dialogue. and potentially like legislation around police reform. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's have conversations about nonviolent communication or whatever it is. On the other hand, there is a side to Pallas that can be cold, can be calculating. And my teacher Dawn called Pallas the diamond mind. And
What does
actually
that mean?
diamond mind in the Buddhist sort of sense, like it's almost a level of detachment that can in its most negative expression can become actually she tied it to like serial killers. Pallas, yeah, like a so cold that it loses humanity.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
and I'm not a fan of the astrology of serial killers or anything like that. I'm not, but it is an interesting thing about Pallas that the detachment, the wisdom, the insight, the strategy can and in its negative expression turn cold, because we lose our humanity when we get too much in our head, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and I see Pallas and Mars as being connected too. And I think Mars can do that too. Like any planet can do that. Saturn can, like any planet can, like, even the moon can lose its humanity if it's too focused on itself, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Like Narcissus crying into a
yeah, yeah,
river.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know. We do have Ceres trine the moon on February 26th, Venus conjunct Vesta.
Oh, I
Um,
like those. So Ceres trying the moon is like, if there is any like grief or something like that coming up for healing and feeling very cared for, and then Venus conjunct Vesta is love, relationships, beauty coming together with our sacred spaces and the thing that we hold most sacred, tending to our sacred fire. And that's going to be in is that in Aries or Pisces? That's in
Venus
Aries.
Vesta
I think
26.
that's in Aries because Venus is already in Aries. So it'll be about tending to the sacred fire of ourselves and renewing our relationship with
Aries.
ourselves. Yeah.
7, 8 Aries, yeah.
So
And then Venus opposes Ceres on the 23rd as well, which is should be a lovely one. February 23rd. But that Venus Vesta conjunction 26th, 27th, that's also about like being devoted
to
to
yourself.
what you're passionate about,
Yeah.
your values, what you consider sacred.
Yeah. I love the room of one's own. I like to think of Vesta as a room where and why and how we need a room of one's own. So you'll want to look to your own natal chart to see the sign and house where your Vesta is. But on a collective level, we all might just be thinking about how does my life, how does my body, how is my space sacred to me? And can I do some candle rituals or do a bonfire or something like that to really renew my devotion to myself and know that my body is a temple and my life is something that is sacred, right? And care for it
Absolutely.
by like loving it and making it beautiful and adorn yourself perhaps in whatever way you want.
Venus Vesta is also about having like a lovely, comforting home.
Mm.
Vesta's the home.
Yeah, so
So
maybe if you wanted to move around your furniture or like paint your house or something, Vesta is often triggered by like just moving shit around in your house. Or if you can't do that, like light a candle, or like I said, like do a fire in your backyard if it's safe, if there's no fire bans and stuff like that, or a bonfire, because either the fire, the sacred hearth of Vesta, or moving stuff around in your home, refreshing your home, making your home beautiful. Go to Home Goods, but I don't know where Jupiter is. Don't spend too much money. Actually, it's going to be close to Jupiter, isn't it?
uh
That's
yeah, pretty close. 3 degrees.
yeah.
Yeah, and Vesta will move to meet, of course, that Jupiter Chiron in March. So that's a whole different thing. But this February 26, 27, 28 could be 26, 27 Venus conjunct Vesta could just be a nice time at home as well.
I just have to say I'm also like looking at, I thought I was looking at the transits right now. No, I'm looking at Christopher Maloney's chart still, and He has Vesta at 3 degrees of Aries, Venus at 25 Aries, retrograde, Sun at 12 Aries, Ceres
Oh,
in Aries, Eris in Aries, Estrella in Aries. So he has an Aries goddess stellium. And
mm.
we normally don't use the goddesses for stelliums. Yes, I know that. I will say that for the record for any
But
astrologers listening. But, and also, we're talking about all of these, and this is happening. And so he's going to have a Vesta return. He's having a Black Lilith return this month. He's having his Venus return this month. And this, like, I would not, I would not be surprised if there's some shit where he's involved. He comes out with a public service announcement or something like that. Or like he has an episode that is just like the stellar episode of his career, sort of a thing where it's about all of the stuff that we're talking about. Like if there is an episode with him and Olivia, like finally, or not him, Christopher, but like Elliot Stabler and Olivia finally getting together, and it's because they're like addressing someone in the pornography industry or like the Me Too movement or something like that, like that could absolutely happen. So, well, so cool. I don't know if the season's over, but
that's hilarious.
be
You pulled up his
fangirling.
chart, and it's so in line with the transits of this month.
Yeah.
Love it. I love both of them, really.
Yeah.
Both of them are
And she's having her Saturn return. Her Saturn's at 22 Aquarius. His Saturn return is ending. It's over because it was in Capricorn, but yeah, it's pretty
I think,
fascinating.
yeah, I think they're great examples too of like of of working with Lilith, like working with that Lilith energy, positive examples of working with that Lilith energy. Because with Pluto square Lilith in her chart, you know, being the special victims unit detective is such a great use of the power inherent in that square,
Yep.
like saving women who have been abused, like
Mhm.
using power to work on behalf of women who are abused, which I think is awesome. And then um and then for him, you know, we're all human. I'm not would I don't condone or excuse violence in any way, but
Yeah.
but I
I,
assume that they're portraying this struggle of his in a
yeah, and what I'll say to that, because what the other thing that I see, you said Pluto with Mariska Hargitay playing Olivia Benson. Well, with Christopher Maloney in his chart, he's got Pluto conjunct the North Node. And when you have something conjunct the North Node in this lifetime, you're learning how to deal with that planet. And so he's learning how to balance power. And he's doing that. Perhaps, I don't know him, I don't know anything about him, but you might assume he's doing it through playing Elliot Stabler, someone who has trouble with his power. And it happens to be in what we call a semi sextile, not partile to the degree, but it's to the Black Moon Lilith. So Black Moon Lilith is in Leo. The next sign that's 30 degrees away is Virgo, where his Pluto and North Node are at 5 and 6 degrees, and his Black Moon Lilith is at 1 degree. So they're, it's a little bit out of
but
orb
it,
for semi-sextile, but I think it does play in because then it's also making a very similar aspect, which is another what we call inconjunct. So you can call a semi-sextile a 30-degree aspect or a 150-degree aspect, both in conjuncts, both ways where that Pluto North Node doesn't see the Black Moon Lilith, that Pluto North Node doesn't see the Saturn Jupiter, but it is playing into both of them, and it becomes an irritation for him that needs to be resolved. And so perhaps he's doing that through this very like psychological, because it's in the eighth house, drama that's been on TV for a very, very long period of time.
mm, I love it. I love it. Well, and you know, the right use of power, um, it it's this is to be in that role requires sometimes real struggle,
Mhm.
integrity, character, self-control, discipline, willingness to look at yourself, to
Yeah.
examine yourself.
Yeah.
Um, so
Absolutely. And then can I just say that like as you're saying all of these things, the other thing that I'm looking at in his chart, which says exactly what you just said, like a willingness to like sit with this and look at it, is that his south node, which is opposite the north node always in everyone's chart, is also conjunct Chiron in Pisces. So Chiron's at 4 degrees, the south node's at 5 degrees. And that's a willingness constantly to come back, to sit with, to heal, to bring up the wound, and then to try to heal it, to bring up the wound, and then to try to heal it. And it's just this constant thing of like, how I demonstrate my power and how this character is demonstrating their power is helping me to heal myself. And is also like, I would love for his biography to come out. Please, like maybe that's what happens. Maybe we hear that he's writing a biography or something, and we hear more about him. I do know, like in his interviews and stuff, he has talked about like his own relationship with his own sexuality, and he's kind of like open and free and like, you know, has a healthy relationship with it and whatnot, and him and his wife. But yeah, so it'll be very interesting because Pisces is a very emotional sign, and just to see what happens.
And you know what Kay Taylor says about Chiron on the South Node is it's she she says it's you've helped people, a lot of people in a past life. You've been a healer in a past life. You know?
And he absolutely has I mean, I'll just speak for myself. Like I love watching them. I love seeing them like, and then feeling like, okay, we can all do this in our own way. We can all, you know, be the Elliot or be the Olivia in our own lives, in our own ways, for the things that are important to us. So yeah, I feel that healing energy for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I love
It's
that.
beautiful.
Yeah. I love that I love that you brought him up as because we talk about this this shifting the energy of Pluto and Capricorn, this patriarchy to something more positive. How we've got, and this is a massive societal shift. Men have to change, women are changing, men have to change, and we have to find positive examples of
Yeah,
what that looks like.
absolutely. And I think it's great too because Christopher Maloney as a person and his character both, like we've talked about, struggle, but in some of the interviews I've read or like his Twitter posts or photos of him, he seems to be very comfortable with his sexuality. But we also were talking about like defund the police and police are violent. And I also at one point today said that, you know, just don't hurt people. But that doesn't mean that we then have to like hurt police officers. We need to remember that everybody is human, including these police officers. Like, I'm not trying to take responsibility away from anyone that has perpetuated violence against another person. And also, that person has a story. That person didn't get that way because they're just evil. They were trained that way. They were, something happened to them. And so just like with
There's a
Elliot's,
culture that supports it, allows it, encourages it,
yes.
even.
And we have to look at it holistically and embrace people, embrace our armed forces, and embrace our police forces, and know that we're not out to get them, that we're not against them, that we appreciate their willingness to put their lives on the line every day. And can you please do this differently, and can we help you?
Yeah,
Right.
I think it's good. I think there's a lot more than can you please at this point. I think there's
Right. I was being a little bit too nice about that, but you know, yeah,
but no, I mean, and I think it's a serious. I think we're grappling with a culture of violence,
yeah,
and that's part of what Pluto and Capricorn is about, you know. And I really do think it's about um I genuinely believe it's about men finding different ways to express
yeah,
um you know, and again, is that Mars and Capricorn versus Mars in Cancer sort of dichotomy. Like we can protect and we can be assertive in caring ways, or we can do it in these ways that start fights and offend people and cause great violence, which is Mars, you know, much more on Mars and Capricorn sort of thing. So we could find ways to diffuse conflict and de-escalate. I do think that this is wrapped up in men walking away from these negative expressions of masculinity.
yeah. And there, you know, I'm grateful because I do think we are in a time where there's many, at least influencers on social media that I see. I don't know where else there might be, but examples of men who are doing this and are having podcasts and social media accounts where they're having conversations about their masculinity and how to approach it differently, whether they're, you know, in the police or not. It doesn't I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but like everyone is responsible for this work. And so I do think it's very beautiful at the end of the month that we end it with a Venus Vesta conjunction that honors the sacred in all of us as individuals. And perhaps if we can focus on that, we can find a path forward.
There's something called, maybe we could put a link to it, something called the Good Men Project.
Yes, thank you for saying that. I was trying to remember what it is. And is that the one that has the guy who played on Jane the Virgin? Because the guy who played on Jane the Virgin is one of the people I was thinking of specifically.
I'll bring it up. But anyway, yeah.
Justin Baldoni has a podcast right now. He's the actor I was talking about.
It's
and it's called the Man Enough podcast with Justin Baldoni, Liz Plank, and president of Wayfarer Studios and award winner. I'm trying to find his name. Jamie Heath. So I'll try to put some of those links below if you're interested in listening to any of those. I enjoy watching the clips that they put on Instagram and whatnot. So
yeah,
the Good Men Project. Cool.
It's just it's a great example of rethinking masculinity, which is really pretty toxic.
Required. Yeah.
So or it can be. Not all men. Yes. But okay.
Any last thoughts about the month of February, Kris, that we didn't talk about yet?
I think it's going to be intense, and I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Just what I always like to say, because I love to tell folks to never fear the astrology, is that everything is an invitation. So just be aware of your surroundings and be aware of the weather that's going on. If it's going to rain, you take an umbrella and you wear your galoshes. You know, if it's going to be intense, we're telling you, lean into the tools that you have, meditate, deep breathing, be aware, listen to podcasts, avoid conflict, like lean into nonviolent communication, like whatever and tools are.
And I say intense actually more on the collective level. I think, if maybe people are individually grappling with power issues in their own lives this month as well. And hopefully this discussion will be helpful for them on that front. But yeah, I do think on the collective level, I hope for the best this month for collective healing. And so, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what I would say. But
so, yeah. So that's February, huh?
That's February.
All right.
And March is going to be very exciting. March, we will talk about Pluto and Aquarius and robots.
And Saturn moving into Pisces. And
Chat GPT. And
oh my gosh, all the good things. So join us next month right here, same place. We'll be back. I'll be back with Kris Journey of journeywomanastro.com. Check her out, sign up for the newsletter, get a consultation if you're interested in learning more about the goddesses. My books are also open for consultations right now, taylorschuler.com. I also have a 2023 year ahead forecast for all 12 signs or for individual signs or just a general year ahead for sale now at a great price. So head over to taylorschuler.com/shop if you're interested in that. And I'll see you again next week, and we'll both see you again next month. Have a great one.
Bye, Taylor.
If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to find more heart-centered, forward-thinking folks just like you. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it in your Instagram stories, and tag me at Taylor Schuler Astrology. If you're interested in an astrology consultation with me, you can book online at my website, taylorschuler.com. If you like my digs and you're looking for short-term furnished rentals because you're a digital nomad like me, or just because, don't forget to use the link in the show notes or code Taylor_C6I at hellolanding.com for $250 off your rental. See you next week.